And we'll get started. So like I said, this webinar is going to be all about reports in ProjectTeam. I'm mostly going to go over a single report, but I'm going to go through a lot of different tips and tricks that you can do with that report. And then you can take what I'm showing here. I will record this webinar so I can send it out to everybody if you want a copy of it. You'll be able to take what I'm showing here and put that into your actual reports. A lot of the items that I will go through are based on feedback or questions that we've got through support in various report examples. So hopefully some of you will get a lot of good value out of this webinar. Before I get started, I just want to say I am recording this. We are social. We are going to post this on various media outlets. Just if you want to go back or forward it on to your team, just let us know if you need help finding anything or if you want a direct recording link. So the report that I'm going to create is going to look a little bit like this, and we can make it even a little bit prettier if we want to. But there's a lot going on here, and I want to point out a few things before I actually get started in the report. So this report right now is all about submittals. Most of what I'm going to show you is on information that you probably have access to if you are a user through your system submittal form. So if you have two screens or something and you want to kind of try to follow along with me, you certainly can, because most of this, again, is going to be part of the system, what comes out of the box. For those that don't know, we have system reports, reports that come out of the box ready for you to use kind of right away. This webinar is going to be a custom report. So I'm going to be writing a brand new report showing you our report editor tool and then kind of going from there. If we look at a couple examples here about what's going on, I want to show you joins. Okay, so we're going to take information from a submittal, but we're going to join it to information from our specification, in this case to get this subject up here, maintenance of existing conditions and precast concrete, etc. I also want to show you multiple groups. So instead of just a flat list of items, I want to group information and even create multiple groups. So in this case here, I'm grouping by specification, and then I'm grouping by open versus closed submittals within each specification. I want to introduce icons. So instead of just text, you can introduce different icons. So if you're trending up or trending down, you could put down arrows or little like triangles that are looking down. You can color those things red or green to show indication lights about what's going on in your reports. I will very quickly show you how to put an icon in and kind of go over the importance of icons in the webinar. You can also do conditional format. So there's been questions here about what if I want to call something out on my report, I want to introduce a color or even make an entire row a certain color. I'll show you how to do conditional formats on single cells or entire rows. There's also data summary. So we've grouped information, but we also want to create summary information maybe at the bottom. There's only 3 submittals in my example here, but I think it's a good first step, and it shows, I think it's going to put enough information on a single page that you'll get the full output here. But you can see there's different pieces of summary that I'm showing. I'm showing the total number of closed versus open submittals within each spec. I'm showing the total number of submittals, doesn't matter if they're open or closed, within each spec. And then I'm showing the total number of submittals that I have on my project regardless of spec, which is the 3 there. You can also put in footers. So if you have information that you are sending off to clients, or you're using information and you want to put your own branding in there and you want that to show up on every page, I'll show you how to put that in the footer of your report, and then that'll repeat on every page. There's information that you can link in your report. So if I'm running this report and I want to quickly get to the exact document type to take my action, we can include links anywhere that you want, but I'm showing it here in the subject. We can also drill down to information. The arrow's off a little bit here, but if on this line here it says total submittals in spec section, and it shows me there's 2 submittals in here, I want to be able to click on that and see the two submittals. It might not make so much sense here because we've got a lot of information already showing, but we can link one report to another report and show that information through that linked report. So it's ability to create those drill downs. There's been some questions about workflow as well. So we're actually going to join in workflow information to our submittal and show that on a report here. So I do have some information about the workflows. We're going to talk a little bit about a formula to create a difference or get the difference between two dates. Throughout this entire webinar, we'll talk a lot about different formulas, if statements, and things like that that'll help throughout what I've shown so far. I've already talked about doing a conditional format an entire row. And then at the very end, we're going to talk about scheduling this report to automatically send to my email address, let's say every Monday at 9 a.m. Okay, so there's a lot going on here, but I think we can get through it within the 40-minute time span, and then I'll leave it up to questions as you're going through. So if you see anything, you have a question, please just ask, and I'll kind of try to get to all of the questions by the end of the webinar. The last slide that I have before we actually get into the system and I can show you around is the font that the reporting tool has in it that is going to allow you to create those icons. So the two font names are a little bit goofy, but they're Wingdings and Webdings. You can see at the top here in our reporting tool, we are supporting the top two, so Webdings and Wingdings. So these in here, but you can kind of see the different icons and shapes that you can include in your reports, whether those are checkboxes, arrows, dark boxes that you can fill in or not, depending on a value. And it might not, and I'll give you a specific example once we get in there, showing an X for false or a check for true. Alrighty. But certainly you can go to this spreadsheetguru.com and you can just search it in Google to find those Webding icon cheat sheet, I guess it is, for this information. So let me get right into the system. So I'm in a project right now, and if I check out the submittal log just to be sure, it's going to kind of match what I've shown so far. So I have this submittal items log. Items are the submittals are broken up into items and packages, and but I see these three submittals broken up by spec section. I can quickly print this if I wanted to, but I want to go into the reports area and create that report that we were just looking at. So with ProjectTeam, you all have access to the reporting area. If I click into reports, I have these three default folders: my access, my company access, and all user access. This is just going to tell you who can run these reports or see these reports within each one of these folders. ProjectTeam, there's a lot to do with security. You can define security at the document level, the field level, the report level, the sharing. If you only want to share certain, let's say, submittals to certain users but keep others private, you can certainly do that. The reporting tool is going to honor all of those different security rights you've already set up. And then this folder structure is just an added layer of security in here. What I want to do is I want to create my first report, which is going to be that sample submittal report. So we're going to go through a lot of iterations here. So stick with me. And again, if you have any questions, please just ask. To create a brand new report, I'm going to click on the plus button. I have different options on the report types that I want to create: express views, express reports, advanced reports, dashboards. This webinar is mostly going to be about advanced reports, which is my favorite area in reporting. I think it gives you the most flexibility. But I will say those other categories, express view and express reports, even if you start there, you do have an option to transition that report into an advanced report to get the full functionality if you need to. So I'm going to go ahead and say advanced report here. It's going to take us on the right-hand side through kind of a little wizard here, but you do not need to follow all of the steps. I am going to put in a name here. Okay, so the name that I'm going to put in is report example submittals for webinar. Okay, so I'm going to put in a name, and then I'm going to choose a folder to put that report in. So I'm just going to say My Access here. If I wanted to, I could open this up and see other reports that are running with or that are available in this folder. But since I'm just placing this into a folder, I'll just choose the folder. And then I'm going to go to categories. These categories are a makeup of a lot of different items. There are the different forms that you have access to. So for example, I'm saying I want to create a report off of submittals. So I'm just going to type in submittals here. I get the different submittal categories. You can see I have a form for submittal items. I have a form for submittal packages, but then I also have a table on a form, which is also going to be part of my category. So in that case, I have submittal packages, submittal items. That's telling me what are the submittal items within a package. I'm not going to click that. The only one that I want right now is submittal items. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click that. There was a question along here, do those include custom forms? And yes, anything that you create, whether it's custom or system, will show up in this categories area. That includes all of the tables or collections in there. You'll notice one thing. Once I put in submittal items here, the other ones went gray. Okay, I cannot choose submittal packages right now. I'm trying to click on those, they don't come through. That's because I need to include a different category called projects, which will open those back up. I'll show you that in a second. I'm not going to do that right now because I don't need that yet. Okay, so I'm just going to say submittal items and then go on to the next step. Again, you'll notice these are gray, but we'll get back to that, don't worry. So I'm going to go to sorts here. Sorts are going to be important because they're going to allow you to create groups within your data. So if you remember from our PowerPoint slide, the first group that I want to create is I want to group my submittal items within the specification sections. So I'm going to find in here spec section, and I'm just going to drop that in to the sorts area. If I want here, I can include multiple sorts. Okay, so underneath each spec section, I might also want to sort by item number. So I've got a spec section 1, and then item 1, 2, 3, 4. Spec section 2, item 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever that is. Okay, so you can include multiple sorts. If I go to filters, I'll just warn here, this is filtering the data of your report. If I put too much stuff here, I'm not going to get anything back on my report. So if I click in closed, an item number, and I'm not sure what I'm really doing, I'm just pulling fields in here, you'll see that I'm pulling information in and it is saying equal to nothing, equal to nothing, equal to nothing. So it's going to say, give me all of the submittals where there is no closed information, there is no item number information, there is no number information. So that's going to give me a report that returns nothing. For this example, I'm going to get rid of those filters for now, okay, because I don't want to filter out any of the information. There are two types of filters, just real quick. There's report filters, which I was defining right there, or there are runtime filters, where you can say, I have a report, I want to run that, and I want to dynamically choose what filter to get back based on whatever criteria you need. So I'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to skip filters and simply go to layout. This is going to give you a very quick way to add the different fields into your report or columns into your report. I typically skip this section because it is going to do some things automatically, which I don't always like. Okay, so if I go in here, I think the report that I wanted to create, if I just start to pull information in, was item number. Okay, I think it was subject, the revision date, I believe. I would say reviewer action. So I'm going to double click reviewer action, action notes, and then the closed checkbox. So this looks pretty good, and it was pretty easy for me to do that. I could certainly drag and drop these columns now around if I want to. So I can just hold on this and drag it up, and it'll reorder in this kind of little viewer here, which is all really nice. And I think for most beginner report writers, that's very useful. But I'll show you where I tend to stay away from that. So I'm going to say finish here. It's created my report, and now it's giving me this in the full editor window, and it's already set up everything that I kind of defined through that wizard. One thing that you'll notice is at the top of the page here in these columns, it is showing me the subject, revision date, reviewer action. it's automatically naming these columns for me based on the fields that I have in my report. So I said item number should go here. So it said this column's all about item number. Subject should go here. So this column's all about subjects. Once we get into grouping and everything, I think that gets a little bit fishy. So I actually don't typically do that in that layout area. You can, if you skip that layout area and you just start to build a brand new report, you can always go in here and say column info and label those retroactively if you want to, and that's typically what I do when I'm done with the report instead of starting with that, because then you might forget to go back and do that. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that there for now. And if I run this report right now, it's going to work. It's going to give me 3 different submittals. The information is a little bit cramped, but I can see if I hover over this, I can see all of those labels up there, which is nice. If I open up this side panel, I can kind of get rid of information and filter out information if I want to. Okay, and then I can just export that to PDF. So it gives me the information, maybe not so pretty, but it gives me the information that I need. I can filter out that information however I want, and then get the export that I need, whether that's Excel, PDF, rich text, or comma separated, if I want to maybe import that into another system. Okay. You'll notice through this webinar, I'm going to be running the report a lot, and I typically do that just so I can see the real data as I'm creating and modifying the information. So at the top here, you do have these different tabs. I'm running, so I've got this play icon here. So I'm running the report. If I want to go to edit mode, it's this little kind of the circle or donut icon. If I want to close all of the other ones because I'm getting too many, I can just right click on there, say close all other tabs, and I'm just looking at the edit tab now. So I've got rid of everything. Maybe that doesn't matter right now, but once I've started to run these things, 30 times, and I'm editing a lot of information, I typically like to close it just to give myself a clean looking screen. So the first thing that I want to do here is it runs, but it looks a little bit cramped. Okay, one of what I kind of recommend as a best practice is to grow the information that you have to the size of your document, whether that's a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper or some legal size paper, whatever paper size that you need. So what I like to do is I like to go in this report options. You can see here I can get back to, through the wizard, I kind of define the categories, the sorts, and the filters. I can get back to that information by clicking this report options button. I'm going to go to these options and just say general here. And you'll see at the bottom of the page, I can say I want this thing to fit to the page width. And I actually, instead of portrait mode for my paper, I want it to go landscape. So it gives me a little bit more room, and I'll say okay. If I run this again, just to show you what's happened, you'll see that the information now is a little bit more spread out. It's looking like a more readable report here for me, but still not so pretty because it needs some color. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to edit mode. The first thing that I said is, and we included a sort to be able to accomplish this, is I want to group my submittals by specification section. So on this left-hand side, we have these kind of sections here. I've got page header and my detail section. If I click on this, it's going to give me different options to add sections or modify sections. I'm going to say I want to add a section. I've got different options here, and I'm just going to say a group header. So I'll go ahead and say group header. It's going to bring up a window asking you, what do you want the group header to be based off of? I can just say I want it to be off of all submittal items, or I can get a little bit more specific. And because I'm creating multiple groups, I am going to work specific. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to say it's going to be based off of specification section, and then say okay. Once I do that, you'll notice on the left-hand side, I've got my details. I've got this new header section, and then I've got the page header. And I can actually make this a little bit smaller here. But I've got that information. You'll see that the item number, subject, revision date, all of this is showing up in what is this, row 3 here, but I'd actually like it to show in each section that I'm going through, because I might have a ton of submittals and I don't want it to just show up at the top. I want it to show in each section. Before I do that, I can click into my section here. I'm clicking on the actual row number, not the section. So you'll see if I click on this, I get these options. If I click on the row number, I get different options. Okay, just FYI. I'm actually going to insert a row after. So now if you can kind of see, I've got two different rows within my header section. I've got row 4 and row 5. I'm going to go to my submittal items. I said that I wanted to group by specification section, so I'm going to go down to specification section, and I'm just going to pull that in anywhere that I want on my report. I'm going to put it in cell 4A, so I'll just place it right here, and you can say it goes right in there. It's underneath of my headers. I can, because I said I want to include those headers within each section, so I'm going to put them in that header section. I'm going to click on item number. I'm going to hold down Shift on my keyboard, and I'm going to click on closed. You can see all of those, 5 different columns now, or 6 columns got highlighted, and I'm simply going to drag them to cell 5A, and it'll put them all in there. Okay, so now I'm able to group by specification section. I've pulled in my headers to the actual group area, and then I've got the detail under that. If we're interested in seeing what that looks like right now, I'll just run this report, and it looks, okay. I can see now I've got 2 groups. I've got this 02, 01, 00, and I've got 1 item in there. And then I've got 03, 01, 36, and I've got 2 items in there. So I can see I'm grouping correctly here. I'm grouping by specification section, still no colors, but we'll add some colors here to make this a little bit easier to see. So I'm going to go back to the edit mode. I'm actually going to close all of my other tabs again, so it just closes things up here. This is pretty small, but maybe I want it to, in some cases I have a large specification section and I don't really have other information on my columns. So I'm just going to hold down Shift, click through all of my different cells again. This is very similar to Microsoft Excel, and just say I want to merge those cells together. So I'll just say merge. And now this thing is taking up the entire width of my page. Here I'm going to add some color. So I'm going to go in here and just add maybe this blue color. I'll make the text here white, and I'll make it bold. Okay, so now I've got a kind of pronounced specification section that is going to create some separation on my report. In here, I could also go through and highlight these. Again, I'm going to make these kind of a gray color. They're already bold, it looks like. But if I run this report, it's looking a little bit better. I can start to see information easier, okay, because I got that bright blue in there. So this is looking pretty good, but now I want to, I've added the group header, but I want to add a group footer to count the different submittals within each specification. So I'm going to go back to my edit mode. Again, I'm going to click on the details, or really any of these sections will give me the same menu. I'm going to click over here, say add section. This time, instead of group header, I'm going to say group footer. It's going to give me that same window here. I'm just going to match what I put in the header, so specification section, and say okay. Now here, I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going a little bit faster here. Hold down Shift. I'm going to merge this information together, and I want to put some summary information here. I want to say how many submittals are within each spec. So I could type in here, okay, or I'm going to go into this formula editor because I want to add some, just kind of introduce formulas quickly here in a simple way. What I want to do here is I want to kind of write a sentence. Instead of just saying, count, give me a number 2 or number 1, depending on how many submittals are in there, I want to give a little sentence. So I'm going to include some quotations. Okay, I'm going to say total submittals in, I'm not sure, the spec section is a variable. So I'm going to stop my text right here. I'm going to close that with my quotes. And then I'm going to include an ampersand symbol. Okay, so it's going to say total submittals in, and now I want to pull that variable, which is my spec section. So I'm going to find in these fields that I have access to, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to take spec section, and really I can just click the over button, or I guess I could pull it in. No, maybe not. So that went in the wrong spot, so I'm just going to take this away and put it right there. So I'm going to say total submittals in spec section, which is the variable. And now I want to include kind of a, I guess, a colon to then show my number. So I'm going to say space, ampersand, quote, colon, space, quote, because I want it to show quote, some space, and then show my count, how many items. And then since I'm going to include the count here, I'm going to use another ampersand. So between each element, I'm going to use that ampersand. So the count is a formula. I don't have necessarily a field that's going to say these are how many submittals in a spec, but I need a formula here. So I'm just going to type in count, and I can see I have some different information. The one that I want to use right now is the ag count. If you click on any of these, it will show you a description of what it does within that little window. I'm just going to double click. Yep, and it shows me, I've got it at the bottom here. Really, it should be on the right, but my view is kind of cramped. So it shows me that ag count. And then if you click into the area within the parentheses of that formula, it's going to tell you exactly what you need to put in here. It's going to say, what do you want to count? I want to count all of the different submittals. I have a lot of different fields here, but the thing that is unique, no matter what submittal I have, is my document ID. Every form record or document record within the system has a unique document ID, and that's what I want it to count. So I'm just going to double click document ID. You can see in here now it says total submittals in, then it's going to show my specification section, then it's going to show that little colon, and then it's going to say count the IDs. So I'm going to say okay here. So now I've got that in at the bottom, and if I run this report, it's kind of the first formula we've done here, it is showing me correct information. So I've got total submittals in 020100, I've got 1. Total submittals in 030136, I've got 2. Okay. Again, we have a small set of data here, but I think it puts everything on one page, so it's kind of easy to follow. So this is good. The next thing that I want to do, though, is I mentioned we want to create double groups. Okay, so I'm grouping on specification, but I also want to group by the closed. I can see here within this, I've got my specification 030136. I've got 1 false, or I guess not closed, and 1 true closed. First of all, I don't like the words true and false, so we'll change that because it maybe is a little bit confusing. We'll change that with an if statement, but I want to create that second group. So I'm going to go back to my edit. I'm going to quickly stop here for real quick. So the different sections again, before I get in there, is actually I'll kind of answer the questions at the end so I don't move in too much, but there's good questions coming in through the webinar. So what I want to do here is create a second group now, and I want to group on that closed information. If I go in here to click on the sections, okay, because this is where you create the new groups. So I'm going to click on the sections. I'm going to say I want to add a section, and I'm going to go to the groups area because I want to add a second group. I'm already grouping on spec section. I want to group on closed now. So I'll say group header. I'm looking for closed. I don't see that information here. If you remember in the beginning, it's all based on your sorts. Okay, if you're sorting on the information, then you can group on the information. So I need to add a new sort here before I can group. So I'm going to go X this out. I'm going to go up to the report options. This is kind of the same thing, just broken out what we already followed in the wizard. I'm going to click on sorts. You'll see these 2 sorts that we previously set up, spec section and item number. I'm going to find closed and pull it over there, or double click it to get it over there. Like I mentioned before, you can drag and drop this information up. So I'm going to make it specification section and then closed and then item number now. Okay, you can, the sorts are going to just be relative to whatever you're creating reports off of. So I'm just going to say okay here. Now if I go back to my sections, say add section, go to group header. If I click on this drop down, I do see that closed option here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on close and say okay. Once I do, you'll notice on the left-hand side now, I've got my page header, which is the topmost thing that shows up on the page. I've got my group header, which is based off of specification section. I've got a second group header based off of closed, and then I've got my details and my footer based on specification section. What I want to do here is I want to, just like I did before, I only have one row by default in this new section that I built, but I'm going to actually create a second row. So I'm going to say insert row after. So now I've got 6 and 7 within that section. Just like I did before, I'm going to highlight these by clicking, saying shift on my keyboard, and then pulling that information down to row 7. Now it's in there. I'm actually going to get rid of row 5 because that's in this header section and I don't really need it anymore. And I'm going to highlight all of these rows in row number 5, say merge. Okay, now I've got one large row in here in row number 5. This is where I'm going to pull the data that I want to populate in this area, and since I said closed, I'm just going to put closed right there. Okay, so now it's saying in group number 1, specification section, group number 2, your item that is closed, there's a second row in there that's just going to give me the headers because I want that to repeat because there might be a lot of data, and then I've got the detail about my report. In here, because this is just white with black text, I'm going to make that bold. I'm going to maybe make this like a dark gray, and then I'll make the text white. Okay. If I run this information now, let's see if we have our correct groups. And it looks like we do. So we have specification in blue. We have the open versus closed within each specification in the dark gray, and then we've got our details in the white and black. We also kept the summary information based on specifications showing up. So I still show that I have one submittal under this spec and 2 submittals under this second specification. What I want to do here is I want to create a second footer to tell me how many open or closed submittals I have within each spec. So really, I should get some summary information that says I have one open submittal in here, one open submittal here, and one closed submittal here. So it should say 1, 1, and 1. So I'm going to go back. I'm starting to get a lot of tabs here. I'm going to close all my tabs. Just like we did adding another header, I'm going to click over here somewhere, add section, and group footer. I'm going to match what I had in my header. In this case, it's going to be closed, and I'm going to say OK. This showed up nicely above my specification section footer, so it showed up here. But if you ever want to rearrange those, you can just click on that and say move up or move down if there was something to move down below. Okay, so you do have options to kind of rearrange your sections if you need to, depending on what sections those are. So here, I've already got this kind of formula, which looks pretty good. So I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to, kind of click, merge these cells, and put that in there. That looks pretty good, but it's not the right information because I've got a little bit more that I want to do. So I'm going to click into that cell. I'm going to open up my formula. What I want to say here is I want to say the total, and then I want to put a variable in there to say open versus closed. And then I want to say submittals in spec section, whatever. So here I say total, which is good. I'm going to add a space and then close it with my parentheses or my quotation. I'm going to put the ampersand symbol. And then I need to put in my, and maybe I'll just enter this so you can see what I'm doing. So I say total space, and I'm going to say closed. Okay. What this is going to do by default, any checkbox is going to give you 2 options. It's going to say true or false. So if I just let this be like this, which I will, and then we'll run this, it's going to look a little goofy, and my report might be a little bit confusing. But I'll say total and the variable for closed, and then the submittals in, and that part should look pretty good. Okay, so now I've kind of split this section here to add this variable for closed. Total, closed, submittals in, spec section, and then give me my count. So if I run this, it says total false submittals in whatever, total false submittals, and I forgot a space in here, total true submittals. I don't want it to say false or true. I want it to say actually open or closed. So I'm going to go back to that report formula there. So I'm going to open up this formula. It's going to say total, so I'm going to add the space here, and I'm going to just get this out of the way. So this is where it's showing that true or false. I need to change that. So I'm going to go into an if statement here, because I'm going to say if it's true, then make it the word closed. If it's false, then make it the word open. So I'm going to go in here. If statement is an if conditional statement that returns different items. So I'm going to say that's good. So I'm going to just say if in there. I've got this formula here. I'm going to take this away. So I'm going to cut that. So now it says total and if, and then I've got my condition. And you can see this little help text is showing you what is a condition. I need to put, what am I evaluating on? I'm going to paste in submittal items equals closed. I'm going to say if that is true, remember a checkbox is going to return true or false. So I'm going to say if submittals is closed is true, then I'm going to say, I'm going to put in the word here, closed. Okay. Otherwise, if something, you know, if it's not true, then it must be what? And I'm going to say open here. Okay. So total, if submittals is closed, then say true, or then say close, or say open, and then I can bring this back here. Okay. So total, and I'm going to say okay, and then run this, and let's see what happens in my footer. It shows total open submittals in that spec is 1. Total open submittals in this is 1. Total closed in this is 1. And then total submittals within the spec is 2. So total is the things that are in the blue, and the 1 is in the dark gray there. So I've got her. It's a little bit cramped. We can always go in here and add space. So I can say I want to just kind of add some different rows in here to kind of add that information, and then run this. And maybe things are a little bit better spaced out here. It looks a little bit cleaner. It's easier to read, and it's showing up pretty well. So I've added that if statement through that formula now. The next thing that I want to do here is I want to go in and on the right-hand side, I see closed in this true and false again. I want to change that, but this time, instead of saying open versus closed, I want to introduce my icons. Okay, so I want to show a check if it is closed, and I want to show an X if it is still open. So what I'm going to do is go into the editor here. I'm going to click into this area. Maybe I'll make it aligned middle. And I'm going to go in here and say I want to add a formula. Okay, so if we were going to say open versus closed instead of true or false, let's do that real quick. I'm going to delete this and start from scratch. I'm going to do that same thing I did last time. I'm going to say if, what is my condition? I'm going to say if it's closed, if closed equals true, I got to get the, then I'm going to say this is closed. Otherwise, I'm going to say open. Okay. If I were to run this, this would work just like we did last time. So it's saying if the submittal item is closed, then say it's closed. If it's not, say it's open. But instead of my words closed or open, I said I want to use icons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up another tag or tab, and I'm going to type in WebDings cheat sheet, and I can see this spreadsheet guru right here, and it's going to open up a page explaining why icons are important. But here's that document or cheat sheet that I saw before in my PowerPoint. Here I can go in and say WebDings 1 for a check is a lowercase a. If I look for an X, here I've got a lowercase r. Okay, so that's what I want to put in, and it seems a little goofy, but that's what I want to put in, and then I want to change my font to this WebDings font. I'm going to go back to that tab. Instead of closed, I wanted a checkbox. A checkbox, if you remember, if I look back over here, is an A. So I'm just going to do a lowercase letter A or a lowercase letter R, okay, and then say okay. Just to kind of run this to I don't know, be goofy real quick, I see if it's closed, it's an R, or if it's or actually if it's open, it's an R. If it's true, so it's closed, it's an A. So that looks okay. That's following what my icons should be. But now all I have to do is highlight this cell and change the font all the way down is these two icon areas. One is the webdings, one is the wingdings. It's going to be the same order that you saw on the cheat sheet, so I'm going to use the first one, and then I'm going to say run. Now you'll be able to see my report is showing an X if it's open, and a check mark if it is closed. So it's true, it's a check mark. Okay. So that's good. We've hit the 40-minute mark, so I think we're going at a good pace unless people want me to go faster. I think we still have about 20 minutes, just FYI, but I'll try to stick to 20 minutes, and then we'll get to the questions. So what I want to do here now is I want to join two documents together. So far, I've been 100% working with submittals. I want to pull in specification. And the reason is it doesn't make too much sense for me to show 02, 01, 00. Maybe it does, but I also want to show what is the name of that specification in here instead of just showing the numbers. So the next thing I need to do is add a new category, and this is going to be a little scary because it's going to duplicate information if I do not have a join, and I'll tell you what I mean in a second, or I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to go in here and say categories. You'll see that everything is blanked out. So if I want to go in and say specification, well, like I said in the beginning, it's grayed out because I need to include the project category. So first I'm going to find project and put that in there. Once I do, you'll see everything else becomes available to me. So I'll go in here and say spec now, and now I've got this one that I can pull in. So now I pulled in my specs. I've just pulled in the category. I haven't done anything else. So if I run this, I have not created a join by default. It doesn't know what to do by default. So if I run this report, it looks like I've got an now I've got each submittal is repeating itself, the number of specifications that I have. I think I have, 5 specifications on this project. So each one of these submittals is repeating itself 5 times, which is a problem. So I need to create a join. So I'm going to go back here. Again, I'm going to close all these tabs. I'm going to go into my advanced options of my report. I'm going to say joins here. It's going to pull up these different joins, and there's probably some good, I should probably have somebody update the help area within ProjectTeam if it's not already there. But you could probably go in, just search for joins and left joins and right joins and things like that on Google and find some information here. But I need to join my submittals and my specifications together so they do not repeat. I also see in here I've got project data showing up for it's joining on specification and submittals. You don't need all of that. I typically get rid of the one that I'm not creating the whole report off of. I'm creating a report off of submittals, so I'm going to get rid of that second specification to project join. But here I go. So at the bottom of the page, I want to create a join on specs and submittals. So I'll say add here. It's going to take me to a second window that says, what do you want to join on? I'm going to say I want to add my columns. It's going to say from specification section, I want to take the specification number, and then I want to match that to submittal items specification section. So even though those field labels are different, the value within those fields is the same, and then it's going to match and compare or join those two items. So I'm going to say okay. We do have checkboxes here. I'm going to skip the checkboxes for now because it's not going to matter because every submittal needs to have a specification. So I'm just going to say okay, and then run that. And then you'll see my report is looking back to normal. It's not repeating that information anymore because I've created a correct join. So when you're creating your reports and you see a lot of repeated information, the problem typically is a bad join. I'm going to go back to edit mode. Here's where I want to include, I'm going to open this up in the formula here. It's showing me that I have submittal item specification section. I'm just going to say ampersand. I'm going to go into specifications now, pull in the subject, put it there. So now it says specification section, subject, just because I know this will be incorrect. I'm going to put in a space in between these. So I'm just going to add that quote, space, quote, and then the ampersands. That'll give me my correct spacing. Now, if I run this thing, my report is looking a little bit better. Okay, now I've got the name of my spec joined to my submittal showing up in this report. The last thing that I want to do, and hopefully I can get it done here in the next 10 minutes or so, is create another join. Okay, this time I'm going to join on workflow information that is coming from my form. So maybe on my submittal, I've created a workflow, which is a separate process in ProjectTeam, a step-by-step process. I've submitted each submittal or a couple of submittals through a workflow, and I want to pull in like what my current, the summary information of my workflow into this report. So I'm going to go back to the edit area. I'm just going to add 3 additional columns. Now I've got G, H, and I. I could very quickly go in here and make sure that, make sure this is all right. So accidentally I unmerged these cells, but I'm just going to remerge them. Remerge these. And then I've got these informations here. I'm going to add a new category just like I did before. So I'm going to say categories. I'm going to search for workflow. There's 2 separate categories for workflow: step history, which is going to go into the details, or the summary information. I'm just going to double click summary. I've got that new category in here. It might create some funky information when I'm running this report now, but because I haven't done anything with the joins yet, but that's okay. I want to pull in my fields first. So I've got these 3 extra columns here. I want to say, what is my current step? So my current step number is going to go here. How many total steps are there? I'm going to put that here so I can see I'm maybe 3/4 of the way done or so with the workflow. And then I want to show the due date, okay? The current step due date, just to make sure we're kind of on pace, or if something's getting close, I need to talk to somebody about it. In here, I can manually type in these header information. So I'm going to say workflow, current step. Here I'm going to say workflow, total steps. Then here I'm going to say workflow due date. Okay, it's looking not gray. I can quickly go through here and say this should be gray and bold. And if I run this, I'm not sure I'm going to get the correct data. And it doesn't give me any data at all. Okay, so there's something possibly wrong with my joins because I brought in a new category. I need to check out my joins. I'm going to go back to edit mode, go to my advanced joins. I see in here the one for workflow is showing me that it's joining on specifications. I don't have a workflow on specifications. I have a workflow on submittals. So I'm just going to delete that join. I also see it re-put in this project and specification one. I'm going to get rid of that. So I need to create a join here for workflows to submittals. I'm going to go in here and say workflow summary to submittal items, add that. It's going to say, what do you want to join? I'm going to say the workflow summary document ID is going to go to the submittal document ID because it's going to say, where is this thing associated? I'm going to say, okay. Here, looking at these checkboxes, I actually do want to check one of these this time. It says, in addition to workflow summary data that has matching submittals, do you want to include submittals that do not have workflow information? I'm going to say yes. I don't care about the other one. Okay, because even if my submittal doesn't have a workflow on it, I still want it to show up on my report. I'm going to say okay here and then run this. And then I've got data showing up here. So I can see this submittal is currently at step 1 of 2 and it's due on the 3rd. This one's at 2 of 2 and it's also due on the 3rd. Okay. I've got 2 more examples here. So what I want to do is do some math based on my my date fields. So we can see I've got a revision date in here, and maybe these date fields don't make too much sense for actual math, but we'll do it as an example. I've got a revision date on here, and I've got this workflow due date on here. I want to calculate the difference between those 2 dates. This might be good if you're creating a report on how many days overdue or something like that you're creating this report off of. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to add a next column. So I've got this column J. Again, just to make things work out, I'm going to merge this information to it. Here, I'm going to say, this is my date difference. Okay. Or really, I guess we could say my rev date minus my workflow date. I think it would probably be rev date minus workflow date. I got the minus in there. Okay, and then I can just since I want this to be the same format as I made this one, I can hover the one that I like, get this format painter, and put it right there, and it'll make it whatever I need. Okay. So here I'm creating a difference. I need a formula. I'm going to say create a formula. I need to do something about dates, so I can add in the word date on the top right. It's going to show me all of these different formulas that I have in regards to dates. The one that I want is a date difference, so calculate the difference between two dates. The first area here is going to say, what do you want your interval to be? I'm going to say days. So you could say weeks, months, days, whatever. So days is quote, lowercase d, quote. It's going to say, what do you want your first date to be? I'm going to say workflow, or submittal revision date. What do you want your second date to be? And I'm going to say the due date for the current step. And I'll put that in there. I can make this centered and then run this report. And it should give me some numbers calculating the due date on here, or the difference of the dates. I do see that hashtag num at the bottom saying it's not a number down there. That is kind of an issue. I want to make sure I don't have that weird text on there. So I need to introduce an if statement. So I'm going to do that pretty quickly because we already talked about if statements. But I'll send over this recording if you want to get it back. So here I'm going to say if, so I'm going to search for if the workflow summary current due date is null, okay, then I'm going to put the number 0 in there. Since it's a number, I don't need to include quotes. Otherwise, I'm going to take this date difference and put it in there. Okay, so that was kind of a quick formula that we just wrote there, but it's using things that I've already taught everybody on this call. So I'm just going to say, okay. So if the workflow current step due date is null, meaning it's not 0, but it just doesn't exist, it's nothing, then I want to make it 0. Otherwise, we'll calculate the difference. So if I run this now, I should see there's the difference in the first two, and then just a 0 or whatever symbol that you want to put in there for there is nothing to calculate here. Okay. The last thing I want to do here is do some conditional formatting, because there are some questions about creating indicator symbols or rows based on data. Okay. So I've got this formula here. I want to actually just copy this because this is what I'm going to use in my formula. So I'm going to highlight everything and say Control-C on my keyboard and say OK. Now I'm going to highlight everything that I have in this row and go up to this box, and this is my formatting of cells. I'm going to go in here. I've got, do I want to format the text? Do I want to add borders? No, I want to put in my conditional formats. So I'm going to add a couple conditions here. It's going to tell me that I can do different actions for each one of these rows. I'm going to change the background color to be yellow if the date difference is over 10, and then red if the date difference is over 20. Okay, so we're doing different conditions. So I'm going to add this formula in here, the same formula that I added before. Okay, so I'm just copy and pasting that if statement that we had before that's giving me my numbers. So we're saying if the number that I get from that formula is greater than 10, and I'll say, okay, let's make this light yellow. The row, because I picked all of the row, light yellow. If I do the same thing and make it greater than 20, and in that case, I'm going to say it's red, I can do that. I can also create multiple conditions for the same thing. So I can say here, actually, I'll just say the same thing. So I'll just go in here and say over 20, just like we had before. I'm going to say the foreground color is going to be red. So I'm really going to call this row out here. Okay, I'm going to say okay, and then run this. So now I can see there's information in here showing up yellow if it's more than 10 days, let's say overdue, and it's showing up red if it's more than 20 days overdue. Okay, so you can conditionally create that information. The last thing, okay, that I want to show is the creating a link on here and then drilling down on information. So I already have, I believe, another report showing up in here, which is let's go to my system reports, which if you are a member of ProjectTeam, you already have access to. I've got these other reports here. I want to just show how you link other reports together. So I'm going to go into edit mode of my current report. The first thing I'm going to do is link this report to another report. So I'm just going to click on what I want to link. So I'm going to take this total submittals in the spec section here. This icon here is link reports. So it's very easy to create these drill downs. I'm going to say link report. It's going to say what other report do you want to link to. I'm going to go into my system reports, click down to my submittals grouped by materials needed on site. So it's just a completely different report. Say OK there. And then if I run this report, now this second group, you can see my mouse is going to change when I hover over it. If I click on that, it's going to pull up a second report for me. So now this is showing me my submittal items grouped by materials needed on site, because that was some other report that I had. So you can imagine if you were creating bar charts or summary information and you want to drill down into information, you can certainly create that through these linked reports. And then the last thing, and I'll be very quick, is if I click on subject here, I want to make this a clickable link to take me somewhere in the system. I'll just click on subject. I'll say formula here. I think I went over this on my last webinar. I'm going to make this a link. Okay, you have a couple options, a random hyperlink or the document link. This is a special formula. Document link here. It's going to say you need the document ID and then the link title. So I'm going to find the document ID. I'm interested in submittals. I'm going to put in my document ID for submittals. And then I'm going to say comma. And then it's going to say now you insert optionally the title of your link. The title of my link is actually going to be the subject of each individual submittal. So now I put in document link to the document ID based on the subject. I'll say OK, and then run this report. And now you'll see that the subject here is showing up as blue or whatever other format that I've applied to it. And if I click on it, like this one here, it's going to take me directly to, in this case, that submittal where I can see information going on. Okay. Okay, cool. So that was the full hour here. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of it. Let me see if there are any questions here. I'm sure there are pulling in. So yeah, so we got, it does include custom forms. The different sections, I talked about it a little bit. You can put in whatever sections you want in our report. I talked about, well, by default, there's a page header. There's a header for your different groups. The detail area, that is where things are going to repeat. That is kind of the meat of your report. The headers and the groups are changing the layout of your report, but the detail is kind of the meat of the report. We did add some section footers in here. One other one that I didn't talk about is just a page footer. So here you can add a row in here. You can kind of do whatever you need to in here if you want to put in your own branding information. So I'm going to put a border up here of a top footer, and I'd say like built by ABC Construction. Okay. And then if I go over here, maybe I want to put in, I'll join these and make this the border again. I'm just going to put in my, or today's date in here. So I'm going to say formula. I'm going to look for something called today. That looks good. I don't need to put an argument in there, and I'll just make that on the right. So now I've got a report that's showing all the information I've done before, but now if I scroll down, I've got my own branding in here saying it got built by ABC Construction or whatever my company is, and today's date. You can always format your different dates however you want to. I can follow up if you have more question on section, just let me know. You can a question about importing from Excel. You can't import a report information from Excel just because there's a lot of, even though creating the report in the custom editing view that I've been working on so far is very much like Excel. There's a lot of extra stuff that goes into it with the different groups and identifying that information. So there's not right now a way to import that information from Excel. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you all got a lot of information here about ProjectTeam. If there's any other questions you have, please reach out to me individually. My email, or actually you can just email our support line and one of us will be able to answer you. The support line is support@projectteam.com. If you're not a user right now, but you'd like to get a demo or learn more, our sales line is sales@projectteam.com. I hope you received everything that you needed from the webinar, and I look forward to kind of going through information on our next webinar. Okay. One last question, I guess, on here is relates to importing. You cannot import the data into a report, but you certainly can import information to ProjectTeam to build your report. So if I go back into the system and I go to, let's say, submittals here, let me open this up in another tab. You can, let's go to submittal log. You can always click on this button to batch import information. So not importing the layout of your report, but you can always import the data to the system and then run the report to get that data. And that is true. Importing is going to work also with your custom fields as well. So I think there was one question about creating reports off of custom forms. Yes, you can do that, but you can also create reports off of custom fields and import that information to the system. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.